Ina mana I ngā reo e raurangatira mā tēnā koutou katoa. Ao te whaatalofa atu ma le wha alo alo ma lo le soifua maua ma le langi e mama. It is a real pleasure to be able to join you this morning as we take on the shared challenge and opportunity of building a better future. Let me first start by acknowledging Samantha Barris, Chief Executive of the FMA, Jane Wrightson, our Retirement Commissioner, and Kirk Hope, a good friend I've known for a long time, the CEO of the FSC. I also want to thank the Financial Services Council for bringing us together and giving me a chance to speak to you today. This is my second time, so I feel a little bit more comfortable this year. We come together at a time of serious and urgent challenges. The cost of living continues to rise, with thousands of families fleeing the impact every day or feeling the impact every day at the checkout when they open their local council rates and insurance premiums, as well as their energy bills. For many, long-term planning isn't the priority. Simply getting through the week is. At the same time, the economy does face challenges, deep structural challenges. Poor productivity and an over-reliance on commodity exports, limited financing options for high-growth sectors, low savings rates and wages that are falling behind comparable countries. On top of all of this is the risk climate change poses to the stability of our financial system, which is only going to add pressures to the pressures already on households and businesses. Many of you in this room are also from the insurance sector and the banking sector. You know as well as I do how important a plan is to help our country adapt to natural hazards and climate risk. In recent years, we've been through the steepest recession since 1990. Building projects have been delayed or cancelled, costing New Zealand 19,000 construction sector jobs. And just yesterday, it was confirmed we have hit a new record of 73,400 people who have left our shores in the year to July. Let me repeat that. That's 73,400 people, so bigger than Eden Park, who have left New Zealand in search of opportunities that should be available to them here. When tens of thousands of people believe their best chance at a better life lies overseas, we know that the economy is not working as it should. These pressures add up and will be affecting many of the families, your customers, businesses, investors, and industries you work with. While these challenges are real, they are also not insurmountable. New Zealand has enormous strengths: a skilled and creative workforce, a track record in innovation, and a stable financial services sector. Let's just leave the Reserve Bank dramas out of this bit just for now, that can help channel investment into the ideas and industries of the futures. What we lack is not talent or ideas. What we lack is a long-term plan. For decades, successive governments have repeatedly denied their ability to fix major problems, waiting for growth to trickle down or for interest rates or house prices to somehow solve the problem. This government is doing the same, looking overseas for answers instead of backing the skills, ideas and innovation we already have here today. And while it may mask some of our problems, it certainly won't fix them. If we work together with clear priorities and a long-term plan, we can build an economy that not only eases the immediate cost pressures families face, but also creates the foundations for long-term prosperity that benefits everyone. Labour has always led governments of change, introducing KiwiSaver, the Super Fund, Kiwi Bank. The list actually could go on. Those decisions strengthened our economy and gave New Zealanders more security. The next Labour government will build on that legacy. When I look across the Tasman as to why our young people might be attracted to Australia, I do see an economy with high saving rates, large domestic pools of capital, research and development incentives. And yes, a tax system that encourages investment in local businesses and not just and new jobs, not just houses. There is nothing inevitable about the challenges we face. They are product of choices. And with the right choices, we can create an economy that delivers opportunity and security for all New Zealanders. Labour shares the ambition of New Zealand's people and businesses, but no government can do it alone. We will work in genuine partnership with the financial sector because your role is central, not only in creating wealth, but in shaping how that wealth is invested and shared. Together, we can ensure New Zealanders have enough to enjoy the present while building the savings and security they need for the future. A Labour government will set clear direction and back investment that builds long-term prosperity. We will take a more active role in steering capital towards areas of greater public value, where it can raise productivity, grow wages, and build resilience for the next generation. That means growing our domestic capital markets so we can rely less on foreign capital and more on the wealth we can create ourselves. It means lifting national savings and ensuring the government invests with a long-term focus. It means expanding access to finance around bold strategic goals. It means targeted support for the industries where New Zealand has global potential: agritech, renewable energy, the Māori and creative economies. It means lowering energy costs and boosting resilience by unlocking our renewable potential and building a more efficient and stable energy system. It means investing in skills and lifelong learning so working people and employers alike have the tools they need to succeed. And it means creating the right conditions for investment, stable and consistent policy settings, a government that backs innovation rather than leaving it to chance, and a clear, long-term direction that businesses can trust. Our future cannot simply be imagined. It has to be created together. Public and private investment working in partnership. That is the difference. While National looks overseas for answers and hopes for the best, Labour will build an economy with New Zealanders, for New Zealanders. An economy that works for all New Zealanders is not just possible, it is essential. And Labour is ready to deliver it. In the weeks ahead, Labour will be sharing more detail of our economic plan, a plan designed not just to manage the economy, but to shape it and unlock new opportunities. But what I'm committing to today is this. A Labour government will work with you to build an economy that creates wealth, better and higher paid jobs, stronger communities, and a future where everyone has a chance to thrive. That future is within our reach. We can unlock our country's potential, invest in our people, and build a resilient economy that works for everyone, not just today, but for generations to come. No government can do it alone, and I look forward to working with you to build that future together. Tēnā koutou katoa.
Kia ora, Barb, and kia ora koutou. Thank you for having me. I'm Katie Bradford, as Vanya kindly introduced me earlier. Great to be here with you. And there's a lot you said in that speech. There are a lot of promises you're making to the audience and to the country here. And I just want to go a bit further on some of those. One, when you're talking about lifting national savings, growing domestic capital, how do you do that? And how do you work with the sector on doing that?
So our savings settings in New Zealand, we have some really strong foundations, obviously, with the way we have pies, we have managed funds, the way we tax manage funds, the way we have KiwiSaver. A lot of the lifting of national savings also comes through the incentive to help people to do so, but also making sure that the rest of the regulatory settings are supporting that. So for us, it's really having a good look at what the different settings are, where we can improve them. And I can say today, for us, KiwiSaver is unfinished business. You know, that was started, so Michael Cullen had a vision for KiwiSaver. So you'll hear more around what Labour will be doing in the KiwiSaver space. Obviously, as you heard from the Minister of Finance, it sounds like KiwiSaver is the thing and everybody's going to have a policy on it next year.
And I think there'll be lots of questions on that coming through. Don't forget you can put questions through. I will have no shortage of them though myself. Let's talk about KiwiSaver. What do you think needs to change with KiwiSaver? Are you willing to work with National and other parties on it?
Yes, I was a bit disappointed yesterday to hear the Minister of Finance have a swipe at me around an offer to have a chat. To be fair, not surprised because we have swipes every day, if I'm really fair. But ultimately, last year at the mood of the boardroom, the Minister of Finance invited me to have a chat around the superannuation retirement settings, because we know in this room, retirement settings and superannuation KiwiSaver isn't in isolation. You know, you're also going to look at, home ownership. How do people save for retirement? What are they investing in? So I was more than willing to have that chat. That kind of claim, I think what is sort of spun to be is that we were looking at lifting superannuation age. Labor's been really clear on that. We're not looking to lift the superannuation age. That's what we took into the 2023 election. That's what we've taken forward because we believe actually there's a lot of settings, there's a lot of inequity that we need to deal with first. So I'm still open to having that chat with the Minister of Finance. I'll just wait for the invitation. We'll see how that goes. But ultimately for us, we know with KiwiSaver, if you look at KiwiSaver, what are the areas you can look from a policy decision, right? And I'm not going to give our policy away today, but actively you could look at contribution rates. You can look at the way that KiwiSaver is taxed and actually other ways that savings are taxed. There are different elements to it that we believe that we need to have a good look at to actually get to that vision that Sir Michael Cullen was looking at.
Just back on that point, you're saying right here, right now, Labor will not make any changes to the super age. That's a policy you're going into next year's election with. It stays the same. Therefore, if you are to sit down with National and other parties, where is there room for compromise on? Is it around those tax changes, around savings rates? Where can you see some compromise?
Yeah, and I think that's the first thing, and that's the great thing about New Zealand is we can have a disagreement, but we should be able to have a discussion, which is why I've always been open to having discussions with other people, including economists, which I got a bit of a slack earlier this week about. I see you, Brad. But ultimately, for me, there is a whole lot of settings within the retirement system in New Zealand and the savings settings in New Zealand. The Retirement Commissioner has done some great, and her office have done some great work on that. Recently, Henry had done a joint report looking at sole traders, the self-employed, what are the incentives for them to enter into KiwiSaver. So there's a whole bunch of and a range of settings that we could actually look at. And so what I'm saying is that, yes, we don't want to increase the age of super. We want to keep it at 65. However, where are the other areas that we should agree on? Because short-term decisions for long-term prosperity don't actually help the situation.
Are you worried at political parties who talk about tinkering with KiwiSaver? Obviously, there's a policy around it being allowed to be used for farms, for instance. Is that something you disagree with?
Yeah, so for me, I disagree with tinkering. Again, short-term decisions for a long-term policy that has realised gains at a later date. Short-term decisions don't help. So, for example, the cutting in the KiwiSaver government contribution rate in this year's budget, what does that say to SMEs who already find it difficult to invest in KiwiSaver because actually they would rather invest into their business and they need the cash flow. So I think we need to make sure that when we're looking at KiwiSaver, retirement policy, savings policy, we need to look at it through a long-term lens.
Obviously, we saw Winston Peters in New Zealand First announce a policy on the weekend of increasing contributions to KiwiSaver. That has to be paid for somehow. Is that something you would take into consideration? What's the ideal contribution rate from your point of view?
Well, the ideal contribution rate is set out in increments, and it's really clear and certain when you're going to look at those contribution rates increasing. As to the tax side of that package, when the government had to borrow $12 billion in last year's budget to pay for their $10 billion of income tax cuts, that's not the responsible way to treat the books. But ultimately, if Labor comes out with a KiwiSaver contribution policy, which is again going to come out possibly next year, maybe at the end of this year. If we're going to look at contribution rates, you have to provide certainty, and as we've seen across Australia, sort of increments over time, not just overnight, because there will be equity issues with that. And I can say this very freely, like for me, I am a mother of 8. I am the sole income earner of a family of 10. When I entered into the professional workforce, I couldn't afford KiwiSaver. I was on a $39,000 salary with a family at the time of 5. Well, 5 plus 2, 7. So these are actual genuine practical things that some people who are on lower incomes have to think about. Do I put food on the table today or do I save for my retirement? And sometimes you have to make those choices. So we chose to buy a house because having a roof over your head when you've got a young family was more important. That doesn't mean that I didn't want to save for my retirement. So I feel for a lot of people who possibly don't know that actually it is hard to save for your retirement. It can be hard for people that are in low incomes. By the way, I'm now a member of KiwiSaver. I also have other savings and I also own a home.
How do you deal with those equity issues then? If you are to increase KiwiSaver contribution rates, what do you do to support those people and to support businesses with those extra costs?
Yeah, so hence the incrementalism. and being really clear about when those contributions are going to rise so that businesses can be prepared for it. I've heard some commentary over the last 24 hours, and again, which helpfully came out of this conference, around the total remuneration packages. So Labor did actually have a bill in Parliament this year in July around preventing that discrimination for total REM packages. So if you're in KiwiSaver versus something else. So another saving, sorry. So Labor had a bill in the House. We got government support at first reading. At the select committee, there were small changes made to that bill, but then the government parties didn't support it at second reading. So we are willing to have those conversations. We are willing to put our words into paper, into legislation, but it does require more support, and we just didn't have the numbers.
If you were to sit down for a bipartisan chat with National, with Nicola Willis and potentially other parties, is that a bottom line that remuneration package needs to be looked at, that issue?
I think it's part of the discussion that needs to be had. And because I'm also conscious that for businesses, why they do total REM packages is because it's more affordable, right? So again, it's not just around age or contribution or how you pay for it. You have to look at the full consequences of it. And again, if the chat doesn't happen between me and the Minister of Finance, there are other ways that this discussion could be had. It could be through a select committee inquiry. It could be through a debate, which we will probably have in Parliament, I hope, within the next sort of year or so that we've got left of this term. But ultimately, the discussion does need to be had, but we also need other voices. It can't just be the politicians in the room, because we will have bottom lines between our parties. So if I can give a tip to the industry today, infrastructure. If any of you are involved with infrastructure, or you might have investments in infrastructure, I know you're involved in infrastructure. Last year, there was a really big call for parties to get together and stop the stop-start of infrastructure projects. As I said, 19,000 construction sector roles gone. The sector wrote a letter to the Prime Minister in May. I'd actually approached the Minister in April saying, hey, this is Mr. Bishop, we need to get together and have a chat about this because the sector is asking us to, pull our heads in. So in May, they responded. Minister Bishop and I sat down. They invited me to their investment summit. We have had briefings from the Infrastructure Commission, and it's around that certainty, because we can't, ultimately for Labor, those are 19,000 workers, and we want people in work. So it can happen. It just really does require, though, and this is the tip, requires the sector to put the pressure on those in power to tell them to pull their heads in, work with the other side and get moving, because we need certainty.
Isn't super and KiwiSaver too important to be political? We need to take the politics out of it, right? And how do we do that?
Yeah, well, when KiwiSaver was first introduced, the National Party didn't agree with it. And then over the years, though, it's because it was such a good policy, it stayed in. But then we started to see various changes to it. The drop in, the kickstart was gone. Then what happened was, the contribution was raised this year. That's a good thing. But then ultimately, that tinkering does not help. The short-term decisions does not help for something that is a long-term asset.
You mentioned, I'm just going to go to some of the questions from the audience here. You mentioned about obviously the construction sector workforce numbers we've seen leaving the country. With the Eden Park size stat of people leaving, what's the first thing we can do to keep people here, to keep innovation, a young and innovative workforce in the country?
The first thing we should have done was last year was not stop the infrastructure changes. And I say that really quite frankly. Again, that's 19,000 construction sector jobs. Imagine how much of that money in the economy has been taken out because people have lost their work. And yes, you can say, well, high interest rates, people are not investing in infrastructure or construction. However, this is the role of government. As the market starts to, well, one theory is, if the market starts to recede, that's when the government should invest. So that was yesterday's decision that should have basically have happened a long time ago. So the government have started to start up the infrastructure pipeline again. And again, a lot of those projects were projects that were already actually had started. So ultimately, that's what needs to happen. There needs to be government investment because the market at the moment is feeling the crunch.
And another question here, the vision for the future that you've outlined here sounds great, but how do you give people here in this room confidence that you've learnt mistakes from the past? Again, that comes down to cancellation of infrastructure projects. That's a discussion we could have a lot about. But how do you, does Labor accept you got things wrong? What do you do to ensure that future you've talked about?
Yeah, ultimately, we've been really clear that we've had to look, we lost the election. we got voted out. So the next day you pick up your socks and you get back to work and you think, okay, where did we go wrong? What did we do right? Where did we go wrong? And the great thing is that many of the people in this room and also in different rooms that I've been in throughout the last 18 or sort of year, actually being the finance spokesperson, they've been open to having that conversation with us and telling us where we went wrong and why we lost the trust of New Zealand in the last election, and there was a movement for change. There's an element, obviously, of that. But ultimately, for me, in my profession and what I've done, but even before I've come into politics, certainty is so important, particularly for business planning. You can't plan for the future. You don't know whether you're going to invest in a capital item or an asset unless you know that it's certain that the rules aren't going to be changed or something's going to be taken out from under your feet. So certainty is really important for us. When we come in, one big lesson that I've also learned is you can't just throw the baby out with the bathwater. Huge changes that basically, again, create that greater uncertainty. We have to take a really considered look. Yes, that might mean that we might take decisions, sort of 18 months later, once we've had a good look at where things can be improved. But ultimately, it just doesn't help the sector, the financial sector, the business sector, if what governments do when they constantly change is changing things. So to help that, then we need to be certain before the election what we're going to do.
And on that, I know that you're working on policy at the moment. Will that include a capital gains tax?
If I had $5 for every time I was asked this question, I'd have a lot to invest in a pie right now. But ultimately, I'm not going to confirm what we're going to do. We will definitely have a tax announcement before the end of the year, but we'll actually have a suite of announcements before the end of the year.
So that will be well signalled going into the election to give industry, business,
Absolutely.
public time to actually get their heads around that.
Yeah.
Because that comes back to that certainty.
Yeah,
right?
certainty, yeah.
And what about other tax changes? Are you looking at any other tax changes alongside that?
So I think there'll be other revenue changes that we could look at in general. Where can you get greater efficiency, cohesion in the revenue system? Ultimately, though, it'll be part of an announcement that we will do later this year. And I know we'll be having a little bit more of a conversation with some of the CEOs in the room around your views around where we could make some changes to help with savings.
Would you look at changes to FBT when it comes to life insurance, income insurance? 45% of people surveyed said they'd be willing to take up those insurance policies if offered by the workplace. Tax incentives help, right?
Yeah, so I understand the government is doing an FBT review. That was something that it was one of the sort of last policies that popped on my desk so I was only a minister for 10 months. 10 months in the last term. I had 9 portfolios, so that was an interesting time. But I got revenue sort of mid-year. It was one of the things that we had considered, and obviously we ran out of runway because the new government came in. So, I mean, we're going to see where the government falls in relation to FBT and then provide our views once the detail's out.
But you are willing to look at it?
Well, we were honest.
You're willing to be part of it?
Yeah, we were willing to be part of it. And again, I mean, we know a lot of tax lawyers that are maybe not in this room, but down Shortland Street, etc. So we'll see where their submissions, particularly because their submissions will be quite considered. So are we watching those closely?
That's all we have time for. That's part of my job, is keeping us to time today. We could talk for a lot longer, I'm sure, but I think the key for people is certainty, right?
Absolutely. It's a lesson I learned in my professional career. It's a lesson that I sort of tried to instill in my 3 ministers that I looked after, which is Michael Woodhouse, Judith Collins, and Stuart Nash. So it's definitely something that I know, and also from a business perspective, because my husband and I, we owned a small business, and so we know that certainty is key.
Great. Thank you for your time, Barbara Edmonds.
Thank you.